Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to your Monday edition of the Post Up with David Grubb right here on Boot Crew Media. I, of course, am David Grubb. I hope you had a great weekend. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about the Pelicans' second Summer League game out in Vegas. And Pelicans fell to 0-2 after losing to the Los Angeles Lakers 94-81. Overall now, the Pelicans have lost 8 straight Summer League games. They went 0-5 last season. They're 0-2 this season so far, and they lost their last game 2 years ago. So an 8-game losing streak overall for the New Orleans Pelicans in Summer League. There have been bright spots, of course, during the Summer League, and you don't want to take too much with the wins and losses, per se, the record. And we'll get into it in the second segment about Summer League stats in particular, and do they matter? But the wins and losses are not the big thing, obviously. But what we have seen is, look, the first 3 years for the New Orleans Pelicans in Summer League, they went 5 under Willie Green. They went 5-0, 3-2, 3-2. Last year they go 0-5. This year they're starting off 0-2. So not a great start for these young Pelicans, but this is a very young group. Let's start with the good. Antonio Reeves, again, good. Best player for the Pelicans on Saturday, 20 points, 6-13 shooting, 6 rebounds, 3 steals. Again, looks assured of himself going into his second NBA season, whomever that will be with. But he has shown that he wants a spot in this league. Through 2 games, he's averaging 15 points per game. He's shooting the ball. He's the only player on the Pelicans roster shooting it at 50% or better. And, he hasn't taken a lot of threes, but I think it's just the way the offense is run. He's had the ball in his hands more often. So he's been aggressive in driving the basketball more than he has been in shooting it from distance. But he has been the best offensive performer so far. You could say Lester Quinones is right behind him as far as consistency goes. Lester's been a lot better. He's been the Pelicans' best outside shooter during this, and on a 2-way contract for New Orleans. Derek Queen, decent performance, back-to-back double-doubles for him in the first 2 games. Only 4-12 from the field, though, so still has to get his touch. But we're seeing the skills. Active on offense. He has some physicality on offense. Some flashes as a rebounder, though I think the numbers are a little inflated because of the terrible shooting that they've been a part of in the first 2 games with both their opponents. There's just been so many rebounds available. So I think they're slightly inflated, but you want to see him getting those rebounds that are available. He was a better playmaker in game 1 than game 2, but there is some foundation there, but there are some concerns. You wonder how quickly he's going to ramp up. He is already 20 years old. And he goes into the season at 21. And we will look again, when we look at these stats in the second segment, you're going to see some things that may change your view of how Summer League stats should be weighted and how important they are. But Jeremiah Fears, another mixed bag for him. 15 points, but inefficient shooting again, and just has been that way through the first 2 games. It still looks like he doesn't exactly know what he wants to do with this offense. And I think that's hard when you're coming in with a group of players who some of them have already played in the NBA, like Quinones, like like Antonio Reeves. So when you have these 2 guys who are a little bit more sure of themselves as far as their career goes, it can be harder for Jeremiah Fears to kind of figure out how to lead that group. So I think that there's going to be these episodes of where you start to see his maturity pan out, and other times where it's going to be a challenge in trying to get his teammates to follow him, but also how to lead. He's got to learn how to lead, and how to lead both in his temperament and on the court. How does he develop into a point guard? And this is a young man who has said that he wants to go down as one of the top 2 point guards of all time. Well, the first part of being a great point guard is learning how to orchestrate and run your offense. The scoring part is always something that you can add to your game, but we live in a world where, in the NBA in particular, the leagues are less and less defined by point guards who can distribute. More and more the point guards are becoming scorers who can pass, rather than passers and orchestrators who can score. And I think that's part of the reason why Pelicans fans have been so enamored with the idea of Chris Paul returning, is because there has not been a legitimate point guard on this roster since Rajon Rondo. And we've talked about that many times before, but I think Jeremiah Fears, for him to be successful early on, it's going to be running the offense. It's not going to be scoring per se, because it's just his efficiency isn't there right now. So if he's going to get on the court, it's going to be because he's playing good defense, and it's going to be because he's getting other people involved. And he struggled with that. Only 2 assists so far in 2 games. running the offense is not an easy task. And I will say it as many times as I have to, but point guard is the most difficult transition to make from college to the NBA. And this is a very young point guard at that, still 18 years old. And you just don't see that kind of impact at 18 years old in the NBA. It is really hard to do. In the first game, they played against Rob Dillingham, who was a highly touted guard coming in out of college. Coming into the league last year. He sat on the bench for most of the season, trying to learn how to play this game at the NBA level. You know, it's Scoot Henderson 2 years before, highly touted. They gave him the ball in Portland, and it's been a mixed bag for him developing with that team. So for Jeremiah Fears, he's going to have a lot of growing pains because he's so young, because there's so much for him to learn, so much experience you need to get. When they talk about quarterbacks, the ones that come in to the NFL and do better are the ones who had more reps in high school and college than other players. The more reps you have, obviously, the more you've seen, the more you've done, the more comfortable you are. Jeremiah Fears needs to get reps. And that's why when we come back to him, I often think there's going to be at least one, maybe multiple stretches where he's going to Birmingham to get the opportunity to run an offense pretty consistently. But going back to the game, the Pelicans offensively, this one kind of got away from them after their early start. I mean, the Lakers, I believe, missed their first 11 shots. The Pelicans go up 9-0 after Quinones knocks down a three. And then the Lakers took over. They outscored the Pelicans 30-19 in the first quarter, the rest of the way. And then it just kind of, it was the Pelicans trying to catch up, and they could bring it in within single digits, and then the Lakers would extend it again. And it just, they never really, from the second quarter on, the lead belonged to the Lakers. They were the more aggressive team. And I think that's the most disappointing thing through two games for the New Orleans Pelicans is that they've been outplayed. They've been out-hustled. And that, when you talk about similarities to the big club, is a disturbing thing, because there were times last season when you felt like the Pelicans got beat just on aggressiveness and want to. And that's what it feels like watching these first two games, is that there's not an inordinate amount of talent difference between what the Timberwolves put out and what the Lakers put out compared to what the Pelicans put on the floor. There's not an inordinate amount of talent difference. But what you have seen is an effort and concentration difference from the New Orleans Pelicans compared to the teams that they've played against. So you'd like to see them increase that level of intensity and aggression when you go into game 3 on Tuesday. Cole Swider really took the Pelicans on 21 points, 10 boards, 4 assists for him. Darius Bazley, again, the Pelicans struggled with another interior presence. He had 5 blocks. He had double-digit rebounds. That's 2 guys who are not particularly big as defensive presences, but able to be active and who are terrorizing the Pelicans inside. And then Bronny James, who has generally been a disappointment, obviously, since he came to the NBA. He gets 14 points, and you got people talking about Bronny has arrived because he did so against the New Orleans Pelicans. And that part is a problem too, is you can't let mediocre guys go off on you. You know, let the first rounders, if they're going to show out, sure. But you can't be letting these mediocre guys. For the game, the Pelicans, ended it on an 0-12 run for the Lakers. And the Pelicans shot the ball terribly, under 34% from the floor, 25% from 3. They did win the rebounding battle, but didn't really get a lot of second chance points, a lot of empty possessions. Again, Antonio Reeves looking the best so far, which is not great considering he will not likely be on the Pelicans roster on day one. Quinones being the other. He's not going to be on the roster on day one. You just got to see better from your 2 best players in Derek Queen and your 2 most highly touted players in Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears. They need to be better. They've not been good defensively in particular. They've turned the ball over too much. Second game was much better where that was concerned, but there's been so many mental lapses. They have not been able to do well in transition, and they don't execute particularly well. They play Portland on Tuesday night. We'll see if they can get their first win, if they improve on some of these things. But the biggest evidence that you should come away with this team, and the biggest conclusion you can draw today, is that these young players are going to need time to develop. That does not mean that they can't be good, that they won't be good, that their futures have already been defined. That none of that is true. None of that is true. And I don't want people to say, because you're criticizing this team, that you think that you're going to be negative about the players individually. And you can have criticism that's grounded in reality. And the reality of the situation is Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen are not quite ready to play and make a contribution in the NBA. Queen more so because of his size, but you're starting to see this weird fit with this roster. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Yves Missi has been a bit of a disappointment, a big disappointment so far in Summer League through 2 games. Inefficient as a scorer. He's really struggling there offensively. He's rebounded well, double-figure rebounds in both games, but again, his offense has not been great. You asked for him to finish more, and you thought you'd see better hands from him in the offseason. We have not seen that yet for Yves Missi. It looks very reminiscent of performances past for him. But let's go to this notion, okay? Do Summer League stats matter? And I understand absolutely that Summer League stats in the sense of wins and losses do not matter. That's not the most important thing that we're talking about here. When you talk about Summer League stats, it doesn't matter if the Pelicans win or lose. There are no championships handed out. But what does matter, and I think you'll see this, is that the stats do kind of line up with what you expect from players. These are the per 36 and advanced stats for first-time New Orleans Pelicans in Summer League. Okay, their first appearance. So I'm trying to compare apples to apples as much as possible here and be fair. There is no perfect comparison here, okay? But what we're going to see is that there is some alignment here with the way players performed in the summer and what they eventually become as NBA players. So if you go all the way back to 2021 with Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, Najee Marshall, and Kyra Lewis Jr. Kyra was making his first appearance in Summer League, but it was his second year in the league, so I have an asterisk next to his name because of that. But when you look at these per 36 stats, particularly let's start with the field goal. The field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage don't matter per 36 minutes, but you look at the scoring. Trey Murphy, 20.8 points per 36 that first year. You knew Trey Murphy was going to be a scorer. Look at his shooting numbers, 56% from the floor, 44% from 3. He made his free throws. He rebounded pretty well. He defended pretty well, 2.2 steals, 1.6 blocks. So 3.8 stocks in those games and only 1 assist. So a 3.5 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. You look at his true shooting percentage, his advanced numbers, 71%. It's the highest of any player in Summer League the last 5 years. Offensive rating, the highest among any of those players. Defensive rating, solid. And you look at his net, 54.8 for Trey Murphy and a PER of 29.2. It's the highest of any of those players in Summer League. And to this day, of all these players on this list, you would say Trey Murphy, so far at the very least, we'll see what Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen do, but so far out of anybody on this list, Trey Murphy is the most accomplished and most talented player on that list. You look at the guys, Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, Najee Marshall in particular, and what did they become? They became those players. Jose Alvarado, his first year, wasn't a great shooter. You see that in 35%, 25% from 3. But what do you see from Jose? Assists in his time on the floor. You see steals at 3.6, the highest of any player. He and Dyson Daniels, but Dyson Daniels only played in 1 game. But Jose Alvarado with 3.6 steals, got a block in there as well, didn't turn it over a bunch. That's the Jose you know. Not a great shooter. Not a great offensive player, as you see there, but defensively in his defensive rating, right there with Herb Jones. Net rating was a positive. So while Jose, your PER, which is not the most perfect number, but 15 is average. A lot of guys were hovering right around average in summer, which is fine. But again, the profile looks the same. Herb Jones, 45% shooting, 50% from 3. Didn't take a lot of threes that first year, certainly. But again, rebounding numbers look about normal for Herb at 6.3. Steals, 2.5, 2 blocks per game for him. The turnovers came down, but you could see this is a young man who went on to start early on in that season. The potential was already there. Najee Marshall, a guy who came off the bench, 40% threes as a rookie, shot it very well as a rookie in Summer League, 12.9 rebounds, active rebounder, passed the ball in transition. He was the leader of that team really offensively as far as getting everybody else involved during that Summer League. But again, offensive high, defensive solid. That team went 5-0. In Summer League, 5-0, didn't get to qualify for the championship due to a tiebreaker, but 5-0, and you see each one of those guys went on to have significant contributions as a rookie. The next year, Dyson and Carlo only got to play 1 year each, and I think people forget that Carlo took him 3 summer leagues in order to become a member of the roster full time. So you look at Carlo's first year, and even in that limited performance, you see a lot of what Carlo became. 8.5 points, 10.6 boards, 4 blocks in very limited time. But you see that the things that Carlos does well, offensively really good, defensively not as good, but good numbers in that short period and a high net rating for Carlo. Dyson, not a lot of numbers, obviously, but what are the things that stand out? Assists, steals for him. I mean, that's where he was. He was a terrible offensive player as a rookie. He got judged for his shooting, which he should have been. But again, he was an exceptional defender from day one. He could create steals from day one. You could see on the ball that he was going to be a terror. Jordan Hawkins in 2023 has continued this kind of production. Just a 32% field goal shooter during his summer league first debut, 25% from 3. He has been a poor shooter since he came to the NBA. He has not been the kind of shooter that the Pelicans hoped for. And you look at his net and minus 24.8. When you think about Jordan Hawkins, you think about a guy who has struggled offensively and has been a sieve defensively. That lines up. Then you go to last year with Yves Missi and Antonio Reeves. And Yves, who was kind of lost early on in summer league, a player that people wondered how he was going to do. His numbers are all over the place in his first summer league. He wasn't really good. He wasn't really bad. He was pretty mediocre. Antonio Reeves shot it better and was still not ready based on his contributions to make the main roster. And he didn't to start the season. He was in Birmingham. So when you look at this year and you look at the 2-game sample for Fears and Queen in particular, PV only playing 1 game so far. But when you look at Fears and Queen, what you notice is very inefficient offense, mediocre defense, because neither of them is really making an impact defensively, and a lot of turnovers and inefficiency. So when you look at these guys, it's hard to imagine that either of them will make a heavy contribution as a rookie. You're talking about 2 of the lowest offensive ratings you've seen, 2 of the lowest net ratings of this group, and 2 of the lowest PERs in this group. So it's hard to imagine that either one of them is going to be ready to contribute significantly in year 1. And that is not to discredit them eventually, because when you look at these players, Dyson Daniels, who's now an all defender in the NBA, he improved, but it took 3 years for you to get the Dyson Daniels that at least started paying back the investment that was made in him originally with that pick. Carlo Makovic, it took 3 years for Carlo to become an NBA caliber player so that he could carve out even a small niche in the NBA. Jordan Hawkins, you are 3 years now into the Jordan Hawkins experience, and he is no better as in going into his 3rd year. We'll see, I guess, but he was no better going into year 1 as he was after year 2. He was essentially the same player. So if you're going to see growth from these guys, it's going to take time, but don't expect Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen to be major contributors in year 1. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't latch on to history in the NBA. It doesn't latch on to Pelicans history. And quite frankly, from what you've seen, your own eyes should tell you. And I get optimism, and it's not to be negative. It's not to say that these kids will not turn into solid NBA players. But what it says, again, and I need to be clear on this, is that they're not ready now. They're just not ready now. And so the question becomes, when you think about this roster and critiquing it and what are the problems with the Pelicans roster, and I've said this, it's an ill-fitting roster. It still isn't complete. And you don't have a lot of room to play with it. And that's the most difficult part of this. And how did the Pelicans become a truly competitive team? Because you have 2 rosters. You have a 6-man group of veterans. Okay, you have Zion, you have Trey, you have Herb, you have Jordan Poole, you have Kevon Looney, you have Sadiq Bey. Those are your veterans, people who have done it in this league for a while, who have some skins on the wall, who have some reputation. And then you have this young group with Jordan Hawkins, with Jose Alvarado goes into the older group too. So Jordan Hawkins and Jeremiah Fears and Yves Missi and Derek Queen and Micah Peavy, all these other young players on your back end. So you got 7 vets and a bunch of young players on the back end of this roster. Typically in the NBA, that is not a recipe for a 50-win team. We've already talked about the offensive struggles and the defensive struggles for this team. Even if you make a significant jump from 29, 27, where you were ranked in those respectively, if you make a significant jump, if you can get to the middle of the pack, it's still really hard to do that. We talked about the teams that made the playoffs, the 45-win teams, and there were 15 of those. 15 of those teams that had at least 45 wins. And of those, most of those teams finished in the top 10 to top 15 offensively and defensively. So if the Pelicans are going to improve, they've got to get a lot from their starters. And it feels like Joe Dumars has put everything on the back and the shoulders of Zion Williamson and Trey Murphy. They have to play at an all-star level all season long and be available for 70 games approximately for this team to really be what it's going to be. And I know that there are folks who are saying, well, of course, that was always the case. But how do you lean on a Zion Williamson, who I've defended as far as his talent goes, not his actions, but is defended as a talent? But how do you bet for certain that he's going to be available for 50 plus games when he's only done that twice? Like, that part makes it really difficult to make that bet. And Joe Dumars is leaning heavily on these veterans, these top 7, to make this work, because the back end of the rotation, the young players, they got a long way to go. If Yves Missi isn't better than he was last year, that's not good. If your bench is undependable, which it looks like it will be because it's going to be inconsistent with these young players, that's not great. If you sustain, again, any significant injury, it's going to be a lot harder to tread water while a player is gone with this group as much as it was last year. I don't think there's a big difference between if you get a major injury in your starting lineup this year as to last year. You can't afford those things. And you can say, well, no team can afford to be without its stars, but we have seen teams at least hold their ground while their stars have been out. Pelicans don't have any chance to do that. Not in my estimation. The margin for error is probably smaller this year than it was going into last season, because at least then you had some more experience. Before the season started, you felt a little more confident about the experience you had. And you don't have that now. So you still really don't have a defensive core outside of Herb Jones. You still really don't have an explosive player on your bench, because Jose's not going to be explosive. Sadiq Bey, even if he's back healthy, he's not going to be explosive. So you don't really have a go-to scorer off the bench. You can say that's Jordan Hawkins, but he's not shown that he can handle that responsibility on a nightly basis to be your sixth man offensively. Where does Derek Queen fit defensively? Because he cannot play the 4 spot. It's like defensively, he's going to get murdered as a 4, because if you take him on the perimeter, he's not able to slide his feet quick enough. As they say, move those puppies. He's not able to do that quick enough on the perimeter. He's going to get burned. So in the post is where he's going to have to make his hey, defensively. Well, where do you play him and Yves Missi? Because you got Kevon Looney, who's going to take 20 minutes. You got Yves Missi, he's going to get 20 minutes. So how much time at the 5 spot do you have for Derek Queen? And if you do play him at the 4, who do you play him with at the 5 for defensive purposes? Are you playing Queen at the 4 and Zion at the 5? How good are you defensively if you're doing that? So it's hard for either one of these young players. I think PV is now, if he can be healthy, I mean, he's the first injury of the year, but if PV can stay healthy, he may be faster to the court than the other two. Sure, they'll play, but I'm talking about with regularity and carving out a role. We'll see how PV does, but there may be some things that he has to do, to improve his game. But certainly he looked competent in his first game. His decision-making, most importantly, looked competent. So you've got to be able to make good decisions as a rookie if you want to stay on the floor. And Willie Green is under immense pressure to win. And when you're under that pressure to win, you're going to shorten that bench. You're going to use the guys that you trust. And rookies, it's really hard for them to earn their trust early. So do we see a conflict in what Joe Dumars wants ultimately for this roster and what Willie Green needs to do today? That will be a question to watch as the season unfolds. Lastly, there has been a proposed trade that has surfaced, and this is not from any reputable NBA source, but I just saw this, and for speculation's sake, there is a trade that would send Dejounte Murray and Sadiq Bey to the Denver Nuggets in exchange for Aaron Gordon, Zeke Naji, Christian Braun, and a 2026 first-round pick. Why would Denver make this deal? If Denver wants to improve its starting lineup a bit after they've made the trades that they've made this offseason, they added Jonas Valanciunas to their front court to back up Nikola Jokic. They made the big trade with Michael Porter Jr. to send him out. So they are fine-tuning that roster. And if you get Dejounte Murray, you have your Murray and Murray backcourt with Jamal. You kind of allow Jamal to not be the point guard, and you also add some defense to your backcourt potentially if Dejounte comes back to the level that he was kind of defensively. He had been slipping the last couple of years, but potentially he could be an upgraded defense over Christian Braun. It gives them more veteran presence as they try to go all in with Jokic. You can't really develop young players when you are in a championship window, and the Nuggets still have to feel like they're in the middle of their championship window, but it's closing rapidly around them and Nikola Jokic. So to get some more perimeter scoring, a potential defender in Murray, it could be really interesting for them. For the Pelicans, you see why the deal would be made, because A, you want to get rid of that contract that just doesn't seem to benefit you and clear some space for your young player. But then you'd also add some front court versatility in the short term. You get a power forward in Aaron Gordon. You get Zeke Naji to give you some more minutes at the center spot. And you get a Christian Braun who can bring some athleticism and some scoring ability to your backcourt as well. And then you pick up that 2026 first round pick, though it won't be high. It gets you back into the draft when you have no picks, when you've given away your 2 picks for next season in making the trades up to get eventually Derek Queen. So if Murray were to land on the Nuggets, you'd have a starting lineup for Denver. That would be Jamal Murray, Dejounte Murray, Sadiq Bey, Cam Johnson, and Nikola Jokic. Is that better than last year's? It may be. It may be. Cam Johnson gives you some more scoring at the 4 spot. Sadiq Bey would give you a defensively versatile player who can knock down the outside shot. Dejounte Murray at full strength could be able to be an interesting playoff performer for you. But if the Pelicans got offered that deal, I think you would take Aaron Gordon as a power forward to balance this lineup out, who can step outside and shoot the 3, who can pass the basketball, who can put the basketball on the floor. Zeke Naji gives you some more length and athleticism at the center position, which you absolutely need, though he may not be the best player, but he gives you something in that front court to add to your strength. And then Christian Braun, again, that versatility in your backcourt as you wait for some of these other guys to develop. Christian Braun is playoff tested. Christian Braun has started in the NBA, so he could be an interesting prospect for the Pelicans and potentially add to their winning formula. I don't know how viable this is or if it's real or not, but it's just an interesting thought exercise. Anything that moves Dejounte on at this point. And yes, he was in Vegas. He's been in Vegas watching Summer League play with his team. There are a lot of guys there, as the Pelicans usually are well represented in Summer League. But I think it's just best for everybody involved at this stage to let Dejounte Murray move on and for the Pelicans to find something better to do with that $30+ million that they are owed to him, this season. You cannot have that money sitting on the shelf for 50 games and then bring it back and try to use him as a savior. I think you have to try to get Dejounte Murray out of New Orleans sooner rather than later at this stage, because it's just something that didn't work for either side. It just didn't work, and it won't work going forward. I can't see a future where it ends well in New Orleans for Dejounte Murray or for the Pelicans. All right. We'll be back tomorrow on the eve of the Pelicans' next game. Again, they play the Portland Trailblazers on Tuesday. So if I do the show, we'll see how it goes. But if we do the show, it'll probably be on at about 5 o'clock on Tuesday before the game. I think it's a late game. But either way, what we'll do is, if you don't catch me on here tomorrow, I'll certainly be on the post-game show with the rest of the guys on Propels Talk. So make sure you check that out. In the meantime, make sure you hit that like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell, and share with your fellow Pelicans fans. Until the next time, you can reach me on social media at DM Grubb on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, and TikTok. You can find me on all those. So this has been the Post Up with David Grubb right here on Boot Crew Media. Y'all have a great one.